In the 1500s, deep inside the walls of the most powerful palace on earth, there lived a woman who should never have existed. She wasn't born into royalty. She was an Ottoman. In fact, she was kidnapped as a teenager, ripped from her family, and sold into slavery. Most girls in her position would have died in silence, forgotten before their names were even recorded. But not her. She rose higher than anyone expected, becoming the legal wife of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, the woman who ruled the harem, the one they whispered about in fear. Hurrem Sultan. To many, she was the empire's most dangerous woman, poisoner, manipulator, mastermind. But what if I told you that's not the whole story? What if, behind the silk curtains, beyond the politics and betrayals, there was another Hurrem, one who, in the quiet of night, would light a candle and write love letters by hand, one who filled her chambers with oud music and the scent of crushed rose petals, one who dreamed not of war, but of building libraries, hospitals, and bathhouses for women. And here's the strangest part. She did all of that while changing the course of an empire. This is the story you weren't supposed to hear. The secret life of Hurrem Sultan. What she did when no one was watching. And it starts with a letter. The first time she saw him, she didn't speak. He was the most powerful man she had ever laid eyes on. Sultan Suleiman, lord of an empire that stretched from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. And she, just a concubine, just a girl. But she didn't need to speak. Not yet, because Hurrem had something no one in that harem had. A mind sharper than any blade, and the ability to write. That's how it began. Not with seduction, not with schemes, but with a letter. A single letter, soft, poetic, and impossibly bold for a slave. In it, she didn't beg for attention. She didn't flatter him like the others. Instead, she teased him. She challenged him. She wrote like an equal. And Suleiman was hooked. What followed was one of the most extraordinary correspondences in royal history. Hurrem wrote dozens of letters, each one more intimate than the last. In one, she called him, "My Sultan, my life, my joy, my only one in this world. I burn like a candle in your absence." In another, she scolded him, gently, cleverly, for not replying sooner. "You sent no news. My soul withers in your silence." These letters weren't just love notes. They were political masterpieces, crafted to pull on his heart and tighten her grip on the throne. Think about it. While other women in the harem were fighting with cosmetics and gossip, Hurrem was building something far more dangerous, a written world where she and the Sultan were the only players. She wrote in eloquent Ottoman Turkish, with flourishes of Arabic and Persian. Her pen name? Mabub, meaning beloved, and in those letters, she created a version of herself that no one else could touch. Not the other concubines, not the viziers, not even the queen mother. Because between the lines, what she was really saying was this: you don't need a harem. You need a partner. And Suleiman agreed. Years later, in an unprecedented move, he freed her from slavery and married her legally, something no Ottoman Sultan had done for over 2 centuries. Why? Not just because she was beautiful, not just because she gave him sons, but because her letters made him feel seen. And if you think this story is about love, you'd only be half right, because what came next was even more unbelievable. The girl who once wrote poems by candlelight, she would soon reshape the empire itself. But before that, she wanted music. Most people think power lives in thrones, in crowns, in silk robes, and poisoned cups. But for Hurrem Sultan, true power lived in something much softer. Music. Behind the palace walls, in a world ruled by rules, appearances, and silence, Hurrem found escape in sound. At night, while the rest of the harem slept, she would sit by the window, a candle flickering at her side, eyes closed, listening, not to voices, not to gossip, but to the distant strum of an oud, the haunting cry of the ney flute, or the rhythmic pulse of a daft drum. These weren't just instruments. They were memories. Some say she requested musicians from all corners of the empire, from Persia, Syria, even the Balkans. They'd gather in a private courtyard, just a few trusted players, surrounded by ivy-covered stone and moonlight. They didn't perform for the palace. They performed for her. One court record describes Hurrem swaying gently to the melody, her fingertips tracing the air, as if pulling threads of memory from the music itself. And while most concubines were trained to dance, Hurrem didn't perform. She listened. And when she listened, it was like the world paused. Because music was the one thing in the empire that didn't demand calculation. It didn't ask her to manipulate, or persuade, or protect. It just existed, and she let it wash over her. But here's where things get strange. According to a personal account from one of Suleiman's closest advisors, the Sultan once walked in on Hurrem alone, sitting cross-legged beside a musician. Her eyes were closed. The player was a blind oud master from Aleppo, known for crafting melodies said to pull memories from your bones. The Sultan stood silently and listened. When the song ended, Hurrem turned, and instead of standing in deference, she whispered something almost no one else in the empire would dare say to his face. "This is what peace sounds like." The Sultan didn't punish her. He didn't say a word. He simply nodded and left. That moment, one woman, one melody, and one ruler frozen in silence, was never recorded in any official archive, but it lived on in whispers, and in the music itself. Hurrem didn't just love music. She used it to remember who she was, long before she became a queen. And maybe that's what made her truly dangerous. Because power can be taken, but soul, that you carry with you. Hurrem Sultan lived in a world where women were meant to be seen, but never remembered. They were painted in oils, admired from a distance, then erased from history the moment they lost favor. But Hurrem refused to vanish. And she started, not with politics, not with monuments, but with something much smaller, something completely her own. Her rituals. Every morning before sunrise, she would begin the same way. A long bath in water scented with orange blossom and jasmine. Her skin was scrubbed with crushed pearls and rose oil. Her hair, rinsed in saffron water and braided with threads of gold. And when she emerged, she would dust herself with a powder made from ground amber and musk. Her scent was so unique, so unforgettable, that one eunuch later wrote, "You knew she had entered a room, even if she had already left it." But these weren't just beauty habits. They were a message. In a palace where women came and went like the seasons, Hurrem was telling everyone, "I am not temporary." And that message only got louder. As her influence grew, she turned her attention outward. First, she built a soup kitchen, not in the palace, but in the slums of Istanbul. Then a hospital. Then a school for orphan girls. And finally a bathhouse. But not just any bathhouse. The Hasiki Hurrem Sultan Hammam, built between the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque, in the very heart of the empire. It was the first time in Ottoman history a woman's name had been etched into marble in such a public space. The inscription didn't mention she was a concubine or a slave. Just her name, Hurrem Sultan. And here's where it gets strange. The architect she hired? Mimar Sinan, the same man who would go on to design the greatest mosques in the Islamic world. But Hurrem was one of his first major royal patrons. In her letters to Suleiman, she once wrote, "Let my hands build what time cannot destroy." And she meant it, because she knew beauty fades. Even love fades. But legacy, that lives in stone. And long after her body turned to dust, the water in her bathhouse still flowed. The bread in her kitchens still fed the poor. And the girls in her school still wrote their names, with ink on paper, the same way she once did, in silence, with purpose, and always to be remembered. When Hurrem Sultan died in 1558, the palace did not erupt in mourning. There were no public tears, no procession down the streets of Istanbul. Her death, like much of her life, was wrapped in whispers. Some claimed she was poisoned, others said illness. But in truth, no one really knows. And maybe that's exactly how she wanted it. Because while the world argued over how she died, they completely missed what she left behind. Hurrem didn't just build schools and bathhouses. She built something stranger, a network. Buried in court documents are references to a circle of women, wives of governors, daughters of viziers, even former concubines, who were loyal only to her. They met in private homes. They exchanged coded letters. And together, they funneled money to orphanages, protected girls from trafficking, and, according to some accounts, help women escape forced marriages. Hurrem was gone, but her ideas kept moving. One eunuch later wrote that after her death, the palace grew quiet, but the world outside began to speak her name. Her son, Selim, would go on to inherit the throne, and though history remembers him as weak and indulgent, he never once reversed any of his mother's foundations, because even he knew, you don't erase a woman like Hurrem. You can't. Centuries later, when archaeologists restored her bathhouse, they found something unusual hidden in one of the stones. A tiny carving, faded, barely visible, not in Turkish, but in Ruthenian Cyrillic, a language from the land where she was born. It read, "I was not silent." No signature, no date, just a message, a reminder that Hurrem Sultan, slave girl, queen, builder, lover, and survivor, had left behind more than gold, more than legend. She left behind a voice, one that lived in letters, in music, in water and stone. And even now, when we speak her name, she still whispers back. If you thought Hurrem Sultan was just a schemer in silk, think again. Behind every legend is a truth far stranger and far more human. And this was hers. Like, comment, and subscribe, because history isn't just what happened, it's what they tried to forget.